Graciously thank our sponsor for the booth this year, Edwards Life Sciences. They're right across the aisle in booth 727. Please be sure to stop by and say hello. We'd also like to thank the ASA for the support that they've given Top Med Talk during the meeting this weekend and this year. We appreciate the engagement and desire to share knowledge with the world. Now, don't forget, we're going to be coming to you live, as well as posting our interviews, as well as posting the interviews that we're doing with the key opinion leaders that we're going to be talking to over the next several days. We have some of the Top Med Talk superstars that we've talked to several times over the last couple years, but some new voices as well, so please stay tuned. The interview schedule is going to be pinned up on social media, as well as on topmedtalk.com. But we are going to be adding interviews in kind of impromptu, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. Now, new to this year, we are going to be live video streaming on Twitter. Did you know that, Saul?
I didn't. Tell me about that, Desiree.
We are. We're going to be on Twitter and YouTube. We have the Mevo camera set up. It's nothing fancy, so don't expect some super video here, but just a little eye into what's happening on the ground level here at the ASA in the trade exhibition. So please, if you want to join that, you can follow on social media. But we are also doing our live stream like we've done in the years past on topmedtalk.com, so you can join in there. You can be anywhere, actually you can be anywhere in the world and listen to Top Med Talk this weekend.
Indeed. I think, is it not true that Top Med Talk has now exceeded 120 countries in its breadth of reach?
Yeah.
And I think we've crossed the 350,000 downloads.
Actually, I wanted to update you this morning. We are about 10,000 shy of 400,000.
Oh, mazel tov.
Yeah. So we're on top of it. Now, in years past, we've used Slido technology. I know our Top Med Talk listeners know much about that. Slido.com. It's an online Q&A platform, and if you go to the website, you can join. It's hashtag ANES19, which also happens to be the social media hashtag for all of you interested in that. But ANES19 on Slido.com. Please feel free wherever you are in the world to ask questions.
We'll get to them.
Talk team.
We'll bake them into the conversation, and you will not be ignored.
That's right. So one last point before we get started with our official interviews for the weekend. Please, just a reminder to subscribe to the Top Men Talk email newsletter. That is the best way that you can support Top Men Talk right now. Our newsletter is non-invasive. We're not sending you a ton of stuff all the time, but it helps us kind of know who's listening out there. And engage with our listeners. The cool thing about this year, Saul, we are now doing box sets. Did you know that? Box sets.
Please share.
I know. So our box sets are curated compilations.
I'm a good straight man, aren't I,
You are
Desiree?
good. I love it, Saul. You're working with me on this one. So our box sets are curated compilations that the Top Med team have put together. That kind of one is editor's pick. So some of our best conversations that we've had in 2019, it gives people a real variety of what Top Med Talk is about. And so that's sent straight to your email whenever you subscribe to Top Med Talk, as well as the Peri-Op Coach series, which is very popular to our listeners. It's little bits and pieces about how to improve care within the perioperative space. So some really interesting offers. Please subscribe on topmedtalk.com. That's the best thing that you can do for us.
It really underscores the
leaders in the world. Now I'm joined by my co-host this morning, Saul Aronson, professor of anesthesia at Duke. Good morning, Saul.
Good morning, Desiree. What a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to be here, despite the massive storm that's going on in the rain.
The hurricane that's outside right now.
Did you bring your life jacket and your right out?
It's a bit humid. Be inside in a nice air-conditioned conference where you can learn and get out of the rain at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Top Med Talk is here for its third year. This year in the trade exhibition, we're at booth 730. We want to graciously thank our sponsors this year for the booth. It's Edwards Life Sciences. Now, they are right across the aisle at booth 727. So please be sure and stop by at both of our booths, 730 and 727, to say hello. We'd also like to thank the ASA for the support of Top Med Talk during the meeting this weekend. We really appreciate the engagement and desire to share knowledge with the world and everything that we're going to be talking about. Now, I want to introduce our first guest today. We're going to be talking about prehabilitation, and we have Professor Mike Grocott, who is actually a friend of the family on Top Men Talk for all of you regular listeners out there. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Morning, Desiree. It's great to be here.
It is.
And dry inside.
That's right.
Inside, for sure.
Yeah.
How's Orlando been for you so far?
All good.
Yeah.
Enjoyed the ASA meeting yesterday.
Yeah.
Good turnout, lots of interesting discussion, and a bit sadder about sending off the kids to Disney today. I come in here and work hard, but I'll deal
Work
with
hard
that.
and stay dry.
Yeah.
I hope they brought their umbrellas.
Yeah, they're not going to stay dry.
Oh, man. Well, Mike, one of the things that kind of jumping right into the topic of conversation this morning, prehabilitation is kind of the word of the year, right? We've been talking a lot about this, and I know that we understand fully what prehabilitation is, but for our listeners out there, can you tell them what rehabilitation really means in the perioperative space, I guess?
Of course. So, put very simply, it is simply preparation for anything bad, of which an operation is a great example, and I think the perioperative field has really led with this, but it could be for other types of therapy, so chemotherapy, radiotherapy, for example, and typically is made up of not of pharmacological interventions, but of behavioral interventions. So, for example, exercise, getting rid of bad habits, no smoking,
Yeah.
no drinking. It always intrigues me. The doctor's talking about smoking cessation, but alcohol reduction. We don't seem to feel comfortable with alcohol cessation, but diet, nutrition, obesity, weight loss, and also some psychological interventions that can go along with that, including behavioral interventions to help with behavioral change.
Yeah, I mean, those are major complicated type of lifestyle things, really.
All lifestyle-related factors, and seemingly very straightforward.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated to exercise, but actually, as we all know from daily life, it is a bit complicated to go out there and exercise. And I think there's this intriguing notion of the teachable moment, the fact that in the period of time before surgery, or when someone is facing a new diagnosis, for example, a cancer diagnosis, they are particularly susceptible to lifestyle and behavior change. So they may be more likely to give up that bad habit or start to exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of people see this around the surgical space. So where do you think this is going? I mean, you said with cancer diagnosis, but just in general.
So I get the two big and overlapping areas I see at the moment are the surgical perioperative and the cancer. And there's been a lot of attention on prehabilitation around cancer treatments, particularly in the United Kingdom and in Australia. And there's an increasing amount of attention, as I say, overlapping in the perioperative space internationally. So there are big studies going on in the UK, across Europe. There's a lot of interest in Australia and increasingly interest in the US as well.
Oh,
Mike, with respect to the growing interest in the U.S., and obviously an area that I'm much connected to, speak to me, if you can, about the stickiness, the adherence, the willingness to accept those recommendations. They're true. The data support it. I have an expression between data and change is reality, and reality is, trust, emotion, and easy to do. I'm struggling a little bit with the U.S. audience accepting those laudable recommendations as quickly as I understand that you have experienced in the U.K., for example.
But do you think, and to that point, let me add one more thing. Is it really sticking that much in the UK? Like, what do you think the adoption is there?
There's a huge amount of enthusiasm. There are challenges within our system, as within any system, both in relation to funding and in relation to the simple practicalities of finding the opportunity between diagnosis and treatment. It may be, I completely echo your observation.
Yeah.
That there does seem to be less traction in the US. There's enthusiasm. There's certainly pockets of expertise, but as far as I'm aware, there's no national guideline here in the way that there has been in a number of other countries. it's probably easier for you to answer that question
Well,
than me.
that's your experience, Saul.
I will share my experience, not just anecdote, but actually data driven. And I struggle with it too. I mean, on an emotional, sort of what makes sense point of view, I struggle greatly with it because it just isn't easy for me to understand. We have a perioperative smoking cessation clinic, for example, in Duke, in North Carolina, where the incidence of smokers is probably higher than the national average. And assuming, of course, the people who want to stop smoking already have. It's the people who want to but can't that we're sort of confronted with. And assuming that they would be ready to embrace the idea of our... In actuality, many of them are kind of saying, don't ask me to stop smoking now. I'm about to have surgery. I'm stressed out. And there's a really interesting sort of cultural, mix to that. And then, of course, we have the hurdle of cost and who is responsible for paying that it remains to be a barrier in our culture right now. And I think we need to get over that.
Yep. I mean, so the cost side I find very interesting. It's harder to see with fee for service who's going to pay for this. You can see with the bundle payments where the incentivization might come in terms of improving outcomes. I think your observation about smoking is intriguing because clearly the one response is I want to really get ready for this. I want to stop smoking, drinking. I'm going to exercise.
Right.
And the other is I really
not now. Don't ask me to do that now.
I need to chill
the
out.
most stressed out moment.
Yeah.
I need a cigarette.
We were really surprised to see that, but that so far is our data, and I think it's a very interesting signal.
And there's been a lot of the broader we as the health profession have been pretty strong in the health messaging around. You've got cancer. You need to rest a bit. You need to go home and relax and de-stress before your surgery,
right.
and it's only quite recently that I think people have said actually that's a really bad idea.
Right.
You need to get out there. You need to get on, walk, get on your bike, do whatever it is, and that will improve your likelihood of survival.
Yeah, I think it's foundational. I think you hit it on the nail, particularly for the culture of the U.S. Is that it is truly necessary to have a multidisciplinary message to change that paradigm, and it has to just be continuously repeated with consistency. That the way we used to do things was not okay. It didn't make sense. The data do not support it. We need to do things differently, and that has to be a drumbeat that just continuously gets pounded, because I think there's leakage in the messaging.
And I think that there are important cultural differences that if we don't acknowledge, we're going to miss things. One is a straightforward difference between, as with many things, the UK sits kind of halfway between Europe and the US, and my anecdotal, but there's data out there. My observation of the US is it's hard to walk places.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to Europe, it's really easy to walk or cycle. Most of the big cities have really big cycle lanes, and we kind of struggle somewhere in the middle in the UK. And the other big factor is wealth and poverty and socioeconomic deprivation, and there's an unfortunate, sad irony that those who are most likely to benefit from this sort of messaging and this sort of intervention are those who are most deprived. And those who are most receptive are those who are most well off, and that's really challenging.
It speaks to a whole nother. My colleague Gina Blitz, who works with me at Duke, speaks to health literacy. I love the expression, and I think you touched on that with that sort of demographic, if you will, characterization. It's true that there are some people who just don't know what's best for them, and we're needing to close those gaps.
Yeah, they'll never hear, and they can't ever hear that message. I mean, they're not put into that position to do that.
And there's this notion of self-efficacy, which is if you like, your belief in your ability to change what you do. So, I believe I can take my diabetic medicines reliably, for example, or I believe that before my operation I can get out there and I can get fitter, and that also seems to be, at least to a degree, related to social deprivation. And we've seen, say for example, with the surgery school we run in Southampton, we just submitting a paper. We did some analysis, and it is those who are most deprived who are least likely to respond to the invitation to come to surgery school.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because I wanted to ask you. I mean, you're in this world. You've done a lot with prehabilitation in general. But I know at Southampton, this is a program that you guys have put together there. So can you walk us through what a prehabilitation program kind of looks like for you guys?
So I think it's important to say that there are different levels. So we talk about universal, targeted, and specialist levels of intervention. So there are some things that you want everybody to know,
right,
that are basic advice around exercise, nutrition, stopping smoking. And, for example, the WHO guidelines on exercise. You'd hope, although I have to say every time I lecture to doctors and ask them to stick their hands up, about 10% of them actually do, but you'd hope that most people would be adherent to the WHO guidelines. Sol says he is. I'm not even going to be sceptical.
Yeah, we did.
And then we get onto targeted interventions. So you screen, you identify folk who may be particularly at risk in terms of their nutritional status or exercise status, and offer them something beyond straightforward advice. And then for those who are most at risk, really specialist interventions, say for example an in-hospital training program, certainly initiated in hospital, carefully calibrated to their exercise level and monitored so that it increases as they get fitter. And I think that sort of three-way categorization is really important, because we almost certainly can't afford to intervene with everything on everybody, but we also don't need to.
Right.
So that framework we find very useful. Everybody gets basic advice. We actually invite everybody who's having major surgery to surgery school, and about approaching 2/3 of them will come along.
Tell us about surgery school.
So surgery school is a classroom-based group education environment that, in addition, so we're all used to this kind of thing, or some preoperative expectation setting and education around enhanced recovery. And what this adds is some behavioural change techniques and some advice about different lifestyle factors. So particularly the ones we've talked about: exercise, nutrition, smoking, alcohol, etc. And the data we have so far suggests that it's pretty effective. People are receptive to the message. They like the message. There is a substantial amount of behaviour change, and in those, recognising the biases I've talked about in terms of who comes, but in those patients who come to surgery school, their length of stay is less than those who don't.
So that's very interesting. We have experienced that there's add value, and I guess it's a question of cost benefit when you personalize, if you will, those messages. So the generic "you should eat right, exercise, and not smoke" is true, and if somebody didn't know that and it resonates, that's a bingo. But our experience is the stress management nuance, albeit anxiety or depression, the functional walking and talking, but stress management nuance, or smoking cessation, are very personal to the individual. That's the person who wants to smoke but can't for reasons that are very unique to that person. They have an oral fixation. They were the one that was hated by their mother. Whatever. But you need to.
Wow, we're going deep into Sol's mind here.
But it is our experience that you need to go to that level to really truly change that person's behavior, and the same is true for the stress component of what would portend a adverse outcome, as it would be a consequence of the perturbation of surgery or something like that. And so we've kind of created a program where we divert them into specialized, if you will, optimization tracks that are
So surgery school's exactly the same.
Okay.
This is the universal. So it's clearly not fully universal because we don't get everybody to turn up, but this is a universally offered intervention, which then, if you like, targets people to particular special interventions. So if they turn up to surgery school, they hear about smoking cessation, and they say, "Actually, I'm a smoker, and I wouldn't mind taking that on."
Right.
Then they get enrolled in a smoking cessation program.
Got it.
And similarly,
okay, so it's your front door.
It's our front door. Yeah.
Understood.
It's not completely successful because we don't get everybody coming along to knock on the front door.
But what percentage of your patients are you guys getting right now?
About 2/3, and it's slowly increasing.
Yeah.
I don't know. That may be due to enthusiasm of clinicians involved in the pathway, because undoubtedly it is helpful if your surgeon says you've got to go to surgery school.
Yeah.
Some of it, I suspect, is word of mouth locally, that people hear that that's part of the deal when you come to Southampton now.
Yeah.
It's a cool program, and I'm sort of drawing analogies to the model that we have at Duke, and others have created in their own settings. But you almost need to have a funnel where people are forced, for lack of a better word, encouraged strongly to go through that narrow corridor to be screened, to and have those opportunities be identified, and then I direct them to whatever pathway and corridor make best sense after that. But you need to capture the universe of people who are declared surgical to bring them into that funnel to screen them and or educate them or just identify that they really are okay and ready for surgery.
Yeah.
So interesting. So you said declared surgical. One of our experiences. So that's how we work.
You're going to tell me I should have said contemplation.
I am.
I caught it, as soon as I said it.
Yeah, but say that again, Mike, because people don't understand that.
So all the things we're talking about are good for you, irrespective of whether you're having surgery. They are likely to increase your life expectancy and improve quality of life. And we very much try and engage. We talk about, as you know, the moment of contemplation of surgery, and we try and do some straightforward screening then. They wouldn't come to surgery school unless they are listed, so declared for surgery. But we're doing the screening and some of the targeting. If we get a flag for smoking at that point, we can start to send information about smoking. And interestingly, within the United Kingdom, as it currently is, God knows how it's going to be, but within the United Kingdom.
What time is it?
Yeah.
So in Wales, they are very much taking the approach that the prehabilitation should be offered irrespective of whether you're actually having surgery. So if you come into the pipeline, which is I might be having surgery, then they just send you off anyway for appropriate targeted or specialist interventions on the basis that they're likely to be good for their population generally.
So where does that line cross from highly recommended to mandate?
So in our country, we can't mandate. We can't make people do stuff.
But so I guess I'll ask it in a less crass way. We always are balancing the imperative for surgery, and we're talking about elective surgery. Emergencies and urgencies are dealt with emergently and urgently. So within the context of elective surgery, we're balancing the imperative for surgery, which is often overstated, to the advantages of doing things that could optimize the likelihood of a good outcome. And that's a balance that we deal with every day. That's our practical realities. How strong